had a coffee and a catch up. And at the end of that catch up, I said to him, I plucked up the courage and I said to him, whenever you're ready to retire, I'm not sure if you are now, but would you give me first refusal on the business? And he turned around right there and then and said, I think I'm ready now.
So James, two things that I'd love to talk to you about today. The first is whether you should buy a business or whether you should start one. I know that you've got experience of doing both. And the second is scaling up your business acquisition. So instead of buying single site operations, in your case, buying multi-site operations. So where would you like to start?
It's a good question. I think if we address the topic of should you start a business or buy an existing one, my advice, and based on my experience now over 20 plus years of being in business and having started a business 20 plus years ago, which I did with my brother and we sold. And then I've actually gone back full circle. We acquired another business and then also set up a new business and then acquired another business. The acquisition of businesses is so much easier and simpler in the long run and a lot more easy to do once you've got it over the line. So I would always recommend to people to buy a business. Starting a business is so difficult. The one that we started was for a reason, for geographical purposes, and it will pay off, but it's probably a 10-year project before that starts paying back.
Yeah, that takes commitment, doesn't it?
Whereas the businesses that we bought, some were profitable straight away, some had cash in the bank that we could use, and so on and so forth. So in hindsight, it's a lot easier to buy a business than it is to start your own business.
It's interesting, isn't it, that if you go into a Waterstones, you see dozens and dozens of books on business startup, but you're very unlikely to find anything that's accessible to the public on buying a business.
You're right, actually. Yeah, I think the reason for that is because it seems to be easier. I think it's probably lower risk, but then the percentages of actually coming out the end with a profitable business or even a business of any sort, after the first year alone, there's all these statistics around new co-businesses that just collapse well within the first year, if not 6 months.
Yeah.
And I can understand why, because it's extremely difficult to get things off the ground and to make them profitable in a very short space of time. And if that's your sole source of income, or if you are working 2 or 3 jobs while supporting that, it's extremely difficult to keep that going for the length of time it needs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've got to figure out whether there's actually a market for what it is that you want to sell, and then you've got to figure out how to price the product and then how to market it. And if you make too many mistakes early on, the whole thing might not survive. That, like you say, the first 6 months, you could run out of money before you even got it off the ground. Where maybe you could run through some of the advantages of buying a business for us.
I mean, just simple things. We're talking about money there, but just having your own business bank account and the difficulties of trying to set up a new business bank account nowadays is extremely difficult with one of the main high street banks. There are other ones that we obviously know about that can help, but just simple things like that. And the day-to-day telephone and internet and, stationery and all the different things that you don't think about when you acquire a business because it all comes ready.
Because it's all there. Yeah.
And when you, start a new business or premises or, business card, all the different things that you don't think about cost an absolute fortune.
Yes.
And take many times to get right.
Yes.
And it just really detracts you from what your main focus is of actually running and starting the business. So going into an already made business that's been established for many years is extremely easy to do, because all of that's taken care of. Mm-hmm. And often you can go back to those main suppliers and other things after you've got your feet under the table, renegotiate some deals, get better pricing, better services, and it's just an easier way to do things.
Yeah, so I guess the immediate advantage of buying a profitable business, which is always the business anyone should buy unless they've got lots of experience and know how to manage a turnaround, is instant cash flow. You know pretty much what's going to be coming into the business over the next 30 days. And obviously after taxes, the profit is yours.
Yeah. And it's such a nice feeling to know that. It's not always the case, but if you study back and look over, 3 years or more's worth of accounts and have your accountant work alongside you just to confirm the numbers you're looking at are correct, then unless you do something drastic within that business, there's a real high probability of it staying profitable, if not become even more profitable.
You went and bought the first business for your new group. Give us a bit of background to that acquisition and tell us what, with the benefit of 2.5 years hindsight, what you would have done differently, because people always want to know what people would have done differently, knowing what they know now.
That's a really good question. I think some of the things are around sort of the financial aspects of it and borrowing money and the different interest rates you can pay on that, the deferred consideration and how those can be structured differently as well. And then about the people that we inherited, from the business. And there's some good and bad things about all of those things. So what I would do differently now around the sort of deferred consideration is always try to pay that back quarterly or yearly, which again, something learned from you just very recently, as opposed to a monthly deferred consideration.
Monthly's tough, yeah.
Because it's, as you said, the months come around very quickly.
Yes.
The joy and the benefit of having a deferred consideration within the acquisition deal is that if anything comes up, which it has done, that actually you can then either negotiate that, take it off the end of the deferred or off the beginning of the deferred consideration. So in hindsight, pros and cons to that. The pros are that actually a 5-year deferred consideration is now down to probably just over 4 because of the things that came out that didn't come up in the due diligence.
So you actually reduced the deferred by what, 20%, I suppose.
Yeah. Which is great. So that's a nice way of looking at it, and it's been done gradually. And then also, having people that are already long-standing members within a team has its pros and cons. So what I love about business acquisitions is finding the sort of little golden nugget, the one that's in there, probably always in the background, hasn't been able to rise to the top yet, and nurturing them and encouraging and training and developing them to then take, a top spot at the table. And that's happened now in both of my acquisitions, which is fantastic.
And I think you've got a very good approach with developing the people. I think you got it spot on, because at the end of the day, the people are your biggest asset, your biggest liability. And in an acquisition where you obviously inherit the people that the business employs, getting those people to want to work for you and want to be the best they can be is just so important.
If you want to find out how to buy a business successfully, get your free business buying toolkit. The link is in the video description below.
I spent a lot of time learning and growing and developing in that area because I've seen how important it is. And also, I've got it wrong a lot over the years, and I've made bad people decisions, and that plays on your mind, and it affects the business, and so on and so forth. But actually, investing in people and helping them learn, grow, and develop themselves is just a wonderful thing to do, and I'm really passionate about that now, and I'm really proud of the team that we have. It's not easy, not 2 days are the same, so it's never easy. But if you continue to try and hone and develop your skills to then pass on to them, then I think it stands a good chance of doing well.
Yeah, very good. I think we haven't actually mentioned the sector that you're in, because I think that's would be of interest to people. So explain to everyone which sector you're in.
So we are in the funeral director sector, and it's a very long story, but I'll cut it very short. And it was one of my first jobs when I was 14 years old. I was washing the cars at the weekend for the local funeral director. And on a Saturday, I would cycle down, wash the cars, and then get paid £10 per car, and then cycle back home with my money in my pocket. And I then built a friendship and relationship with that company, and then grew and spent more time with them, and then actually left university early to work for them full time.
Okay.
But after a year or so, I very quickly realised that I wasn't going to be able to grow and develop very quickly within a small business, small family-run business. So I set off to conquer the world, did a few things up in London, and then started this other business with my brother. We went international. We started over in the States as well. And we sold that company, but retained and stayed on. And I was there as managing director at the end for 3 years of that large manufacturing company. And I went one day to my old friend who I'd worked for in the funeral directors just before I was going to get my hair cut, had a quick coffee and a catch up with him. It was just after our trip to Amsterdam.
Okay.
So the day we spent with you, asking you so many questions and having that almost one-to-one time with you was just fantastic. And it really sparked me off to think, I definitely want to do this now. So I was thinking, what could I do? And I wanted to get into a sector that was recession-proof. This was before the pandemic. So I was thinking, what is recession-proof? And there was 2 words that kept coming back to me. There's 2 things certain in life, which is death and taxes.
Yeah.
And I knew a bit about the funeral industry and the funeral profession. I didn't know so much about the tax apart from paying a load. But I went to my friend, had a coffee and a catch up. And at the end of that catch up, I said to him, I plucked up the courage and I said to him, whenever you're ready to retire, I'm not sure if you are now, but would you give me first refusal on the business? And he turned around right there and then and said, I think I'm ready now.
Wow.
And that was in October. And then 6th of March, we signed on the dotted line.
6 months later.
Yeah. And Boris Johnson 10 days later said, anyone that can work from home, work from home. And we went into a first lockdown 10 days after acquiring our first business. In hindsight, good timing. We could spend time and focus on that whilst growing that as well. But an interesting time for what we did. And then we've grown and developed and bought another funeral directors since then as well, last December.
Very interesting. So the second acquisition, obviously you could leverage your knowledge from the first, but I would imagine it was quite different. I mean, no two deals are the same. But could you take what you learned from the first and apply it to the second? Were there enough similarities to do that?
Yes, yeah. And as with most things in life, the first time is always the most terrifying and difficult and nerve-wracking. But once you've done that and you've actually, I can do this now, then it makes you a bit more courageous in your second acquisition as well. And the second one was fantastic, another lovely family-run business, and got on really well with the owners who were in their late 80s, and their daughter and son-in-law were running the business for them, and they wanted to retire and step back as well. So good timing. Again, there was no succession plan in place past that. And I think they were waiting for a family member to sort of take over. And sadly, that didn't happen for them. However, I feel like I've been adopted into the family and have a wonderful relationship with the previous owners. And recently went to their 70th wedding anniversary, which was a really precious day to be invited to that as well. And again, having that knowledge, but also even better the second time was having people that had gone through that journey with me from the first acquisition, who didn't necessarily know me before I came in through the door, to then be able to come alongside me and be able to explain to the new team, things are going to be okay. I remember exactly how you feel finding out on the day like today, but it's okay. I've been through that. This is what happened. This is where we are now, and it's exciting and it will be good. So that was so much better to have those people around you.
Sounds amazing. So tell me about the financing. How did you finance these acquisitions? Speak in broad terms. I realize there's always confidentiality agreements. So just speak in broad principles, perhaps, rather than numbers.
Yeah. So the first acquisition, again, is the first time. So you've got no proven track record. And high street banks are very reluctant to lend to people without proven track record, so it's very hard. So I did a friends and family round to gather the initial conversation that was needed on day one, but then established a deal with the seller that we would do an initial lump sum up front and then a deferred consideration over 5 years. That was going to be paid monthly, is paid monthly. And that's when I said to you before, some things came up that weren't found in the due diligence.
Yeah.
And again, still got a very good relationship with the seller and just spoke about it. And we agreed that, okay, we'll take that off.
I think as long as they are legitimate, it's very hard to disagree, isn't it?
And that's how we did it. We approached each time that something came up in that way. And because you've got the payments coming each month, so maybe this is where the benefit of a monthly payment, there's not many, but maybe this is one of them, was that actually if I took that away or if that was going to be altered in any way, that would have hurt them because they're expecting that monthly payout.
And maybe relying upon it as well.
So to take it off the end seems a long way away when
I agree.
you're talking in years, and over 5 years, I would have thought most things, if not everything, would have come out by then, which it has, and we haven't found anything new, recently. So.
Yeah, I mean, the chances diminish over time, don't they? Because it's now your business, and the previous owners sort of fade into the distance. So, tell us about how you can grow a business like this. Obviously, you've done 2 acquisitions. You've got a startup sitting alongside that, which we've said. That's organic growth, and that's going to take more time. But how are you going to scale up the business, and where are you aiming towards? What's the goal?
That's great. I'm very passionate about goal setting, so we have got different goals along the way and along the years as well. And what I've learned through doing the 2 acquisitions and doing the new startup as well is it's really hard to do one at a time. Whereas the new goal and the next acquisition will have at least one company with 2 or more shops or branches, so that we can speed up that growth of acquisition. Because the reality is it will take around the same amount of time and the same amount of energy and input, whether you do one acquisition for one shop or whether you do one acquisition for 2, 3, 4, or 5 shops. The only difference probably will be the money side of it that you'll need to put in. But again, you're looking at a bigger company. And it's really hard to run a very small business and just have 1 or 2. And we're in that sort of difficult period where actually if we have 3 or more or 5 or 10, you've got the sort of economies of scale, you've got the bigger team that you can call upon.
Well, I guess also with 2 sites, 2 main sites, you're pulled into those quite a lot, because you've got, by virtue of you spending lots of time with those staff, they are going to be coming to you with things that quite possibly in the future would be someone else they would be going to. And when you've got, let's say you had 10 sites, there's no way you could be zipping around between those 10 sites. So it actually forces you to create a management structure that then allows you to go from 10 to 20, 20 to 50 and so forth.
And the hindsight of running that bigger manufacturing organization that I was part of was that we had around 100 employees over 2 sites and 24-hour manufacturing and things like that. So we had that management team in place, and it was so much easier. This is actually harder to go back to a smaller business or a couple of businesses than it was to run a larger business. And most people looking in from the outside would think the opposite of that. Whereas actually, I know that we're in this sort of difficult position right now with 2, and
you're kind of in the middle, aren't you? Yeah.
So I don't want to stop there, because 1 is easier than 2.
Yes.
And 3 or 4 or 5 is easier than 1 or 2, because you've built that team around you and all the other things that come with that.
Buying a business is a roller coaster, which is why you need a lawyer who knows what he is doing. So why not use mine? His name is John Andrews, and you can find his contact details below this video.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting when people say they don't have time to buy a business because they feel it takes a lot of time. And they say, once I own the business, it's been massively time consuming. They're probably right if they don't have any sort of management and they turn it into a job rather than a business. And I'm not saying that you've done that, you haven't done that, but you're absolutely right. Is you start getting the scalability once you get past a few sites, because you are absolutely forced to put in that area manager, and you have to have that managing director, and you have to have someone looking after the finance. Well, maybe at the moment you look at the bank account yourself and you check on things and you pay the bills yourself. So it forces you to create a structure which gives you such an advantage, though, when you are growing, because it makes it easier from that moment onwards. You just slot those new acquisitions into the structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to that day and looking forward to that next acquisition, which will double us or even more. And that's really exciting to think that we can go from what we are right now in terms of people and turnover and premises, and we can actually double or even, just in one deal. And then from there, can we double again maybe? So future goals for us, we really care about people and we really love looking after people. One of the phrases we use is that we're there to sort of care for people in their hour of need. And we do a really good job of that. The team that we have around us, the funeral arrangers and the people that look after everything that goes on are extremely good at that. So all we want to do is just look after more people. Those 2 things certainly in life aren't going away. So whilst that's still the case, we just want to look after as many people, as many families as we can. And we want to do that geographically. From what we do, we're trying to work out no more than 30 minutes drive from one place to the next, because then we're not stepping on each other's toes, but we have support if we need it. And then we want to sort of spread out across the southeast of England where we are, and then further afield after that as well.
And I think in your sector, you've got it absolutely spot on with the approach and the culture, if you like, because people are only going to sell to you if they like you and if they like what you're doing. And you've proven the concepts, if you like, that you can acquire a business in this sector and maintain the integrity of the business and not be a sort of corporate takeover. And I think that personal touch is just so critical.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but I guess the hindsight as well as actually we were in our old company, manufacturing company, we were acquired by a corporate,
Right.
a large, multinational corporate company, very nice company and have no bad words to say about them at all. However, they were a large corporate. So they did come in with certain programs and systems and ways of doing things
Yes.
because that's how they had to run the business. And again, no issues with that. But you're right, we're coming in very much focusing on the people that are there. And the first thing I do when we do an acquisition is to sit down with everybody, and I do it individually, and I spend time with them, and I sort of just put their mind at ease that their job is still there, that they're still going to be looked after, and then I ask them 3 questions, and the questions are: if this was your business, because I want you to start thinking of it like your business, what would you stop doing? And if this was your business, because I want you to think of it like your business, what would you start doing? And the last question is: if money was no object, and I caveat to say it is, but if money was no object, what would you want to do?
Interesting.
And with the first acquisition, just very quickly on that one, I sat down with everybody. We went through all of those things, and over a number of weeks, we started to compile a list for each person. And some things were simple, moving one thing from one place of the office to the other, which they hadn't been able to do. Other things were larger acquisitions of vehicles and so on and so forth, which we did as well. And after 3 months, I thought, well, we've done quite a lot here. I wonder how many we've done. So I totaled them up, and in our morning huddle meeting with the team, I said, do you know how many of these ideas and suggestions that we've done over the last 3 months? And there were some guesses of 15 and 20 and so on and so forth. I said, we've done over 100.
Wow.
And it was their ideas and suggestions. They weren't all mine. I had similar ones.
Create such a commitment from those staff to you. It must really bond you together.
It was wonderful because, again, no bad words about anybody, but if you've been running a business in a certain way for decades or even centuries for the first one, you don't want to change it too much to then, whilst it's on your watch, make it different in any way. So I was coming in with a new pair of eyes and new ears, and the corporate background helped in certain ways as well behind the scenes, but not to make it too corporate, and to give people...
It was professionalising it, perhaps, yeah.
And just give them the ability to do the things that they were their ideas, they were their suggestions. And we still do that now, and we still ask them, and I asked them a little while ago the same sort of questions, and we go through and certain things that I'm not thinking of, they're thinking of, or they're hearing and they're seeing, because they are on the front line more than I am. So it's nice to get those, and then we action those as quickly as we can. And then the key is to feedback that we have actioned those things. Otherwise, they don't know whether...
They don't know that you've done it. And so am I right in saying that on the second acquisition, some of the staff from the first one spoke to the staff on the second one? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So it was day 2, actually. And this is the fun side of acquisition. I was, as you've been, I'm sure, I was waiting in a car park just around the corner from the shop, waiting for that phone call. It's a bit like when you buy a house and the solicitors say, yep, you can hand over the keys now. Yeah. And it was that phone call that I was waiting for. I think it was a Friday afternoon.
Usually is.
Waiting and finally got the call that it had all gone through. So I went round, the owners were there, they told the team, and I was able to tell them as well and go around with them. And then on the next day, on the Monday, we went back round with my right-hand man, and we went round together, and I just let them talk. I stepped back out the way, let them have that conversation.
Yeah, if you'd been hovering in the background, it would have it wouldn't have had the same impact, would it?
No. So, and they could ask him anything and talk about anything they wanted to, and it was really great. And another thing for the new person that has come down with me as part of the first acquisition was the first time they'd been able to do that, and are now a very key member of our deal team.
It's been great talking to you as always. Really very interesting, and I think you're building a fantastic business.